Hey guys, Mr. Williams here for another week of at home instruction. It's going to be pretty quick this week. We just ended the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl, kind of those 1930s, those dirty 30s time period, and we're going to transition into World War II. World War II, you could take a whole college class on World War II. For this purpose, I mean, this is seventh grade. We're really more or less just going to build a little bit of background knowledge, or that fancy word that we've talked about, schema. We're going to build some schema about World War II. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I'm actually going to, be that guy and give you a little bit of reading material and some questions to follow up with that. But let's talk about World War II a little bit. So the Great Depression ends partly because World War II begins. We've talked about how the economy is great during times of war, just like it was during World War One. The United States government, or any government really, is going to be needing a lot of things. So the demand is up. When the demand is up, you need to fulfill that by supplying the goods, especially with farming and things like that, manufacturing. And so it's going to provide jobs for people to try and keep up with that demand. So World War II begins. It kind of ends the Great Depression, along with the fact that the drought ended and the government had created jobs and the New Deal program. So it all just kind of comes to a head in the late 1930s. So 1933, backing up just a little bit, Adolf Hitler becomes Chancellor of Germany, and kind of creates this Nazi party, or the Third Reich as he calls it, and they take charge of Germany. Basically, he becomes a dictator, and he's in complete control of Germany. We've talked, like what dictators are. They People don't really have a lot of rights under dictators. So he takes over Germany, and he promises all of these great things for Germany. Remember, when World War One ended, Germany kind of had to take the blame for it, and the economy and living conditions weren't great in Germany. So then you've got this guy, very charismatic guy, Hitler, who says, I will get us out of this rut that we're in, and we will be the number one nation in the world. We'll take over the world. We will be a great empire, a great country again. And so people start supporting Hitler in Germany. September 1st, 1939, Germany invades Poland, and that officially begins World War II. Now, just like during World War One, the United States does not immediately get involved in World War II. Just like in World War One, World War II starts out as a European situation. All of these countries over in Europe, like France and Great Britain and Germany and Italy and France and all these places, it's mostly involves them, and the United States is not involved. However, just like in World War One, the United States has friends. Great Britain and France, they're buddies, they're friends. So the United States is going to support them in ways, whether it's sending over supplies, in some cases sending over troops to help them, or volunteers to serve in the British Army and whatnot. So they're going to help them in those ways. Germany, Italy, and Japan sign a pact in 1940, creating the Axis powers. So in World War One, you had the Central and the Allies. Well, in World War II, you're going to have the Axis and the Allies, and the Axis more or less are the bad guys there. That's going to be Germany, Italy, and Japan, and a few others, and then Great Britain and the our other friends, which will eventually join them, will be the Allied powers. And we joined them in 1941. And we joined them because one of those Axis powers, good old Japan, attacks us. December 7th, 1941, they attack us at Pearl Harbor. And I'm sure you've heard of Pearl Harbor. They bombard our Navy port there, killing many, many American forces and civilians as well. And that leads us into the war. We've been attacked. Well, we can't take that. We're America. We're going to fight back. So we join the war. Now, when you think of the word theater, you probably think of going to the movie theaters or something like that. In wars, theater is just a location where a battle or a series of battles is taking place. And in World War II, you have a few different theaters, I guess you could say. Probably the two most ones that we'll talk about, especially where the United States is involved, is the European theater. Obviously, that's going to include Europe, Great Britain, Germany, France, Italy, places like that. And then you have the Pacific theater. That's going to include where we were attacked in Hawaii at Pearl Harbor. That's going to include Japan, places like that, islands throughout the Pacific Ocean. Those are really the two main theaters that you're going to hear about and talk about in World War II studies, because that's where most of the battles took place, especially where the United States was involved. So, United States is officially involved in World War II because of Pearl Harbor, because Japan attacks us. On September 3rd, 1943, Italy surrenders to the Allies. So Italy's kind of taken out of the picture as well. However, the main guy there, Mussolini, is able to escape with help from Hitler. June 6, 1944 is a huge day in World War II history. We call this day D-Day. That's the day that all of these Allied forces are able to land on Normandy beaches. And this is in France. France at the moment is under Nazi control. It's under Axis control. So these Allied powers, Americans included, land on the Normandy beaches and in an attempt to free France from German rule. And they do that. In fact, the 2 months later, in August of 1944, Paris, France, is liberated or it's freed from German control. A lot of casualties on D-Day for the Allies as well as the Axis powers, but it's significant because that's kind of we're on the move at this point, and we're trying to take back land that Germany and the Axis powers has taken away. France being one of those places. April 12th, 1945, U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, or FDR, dies. He is succeeded by his vice president, Harry Truman. Now, interesting fact about Franklin Roosevelt, he served as president from 1933 until 1945. And if you do the math, that's definitely more than 2 terms. He actually serves 4 terms or 3.5 terms since he dies in his last term. Only president to do so. And he's able to do this because the United States is at war. And most people were of the thought that we don't need to change leadership during the middle of a war. It would be good for us. But we end up doing that anyway because FDR dies towards the end of the war and Harry Truman takes over. Just a few days later, a couple weeks later, on April 30th, 1945, Adolf Hitler realizes that Germany is fixing to lose this war and he just can't live with himself, and so he commits suicide. Now, sure, there's all kinds of conspiracy theories that he went to South America, whatever. For our purposes, Adolf Hitler killed himself April 30th, 1945. And then, a week later, May 7th, Germany surrenders to the Allies. So that's like the European front that's coming to an end there when Germany surrenders and the United States and the Allies have taken control of that area. But we still got that little Japan issue. Japan hasn't surrendered yet. They're the ones who brought us into the war in the first place. So we start focusing our efforts over there. We drop on August 6, 1945, we drop an atomic bomb, huge bomb, on Hiroshima in Japan. The city's devastated, killing tons and tons of people. And then a few days later, on August 9th, we drop another atomic bomb on Nagasaki, and this forces Japan to surrender to us. September 2nd, 1945, Japan surrenders to the United States and the Allies, and thus ends World War II. Something we didn't talk about during this whole thing I was spilling out is what's called the Holocaust. The Holocaust. So Hitler was this really evil, bad guy. He thought he could take over the world. We already talked about his war efforts there, but what he was also doing is he was a prejudice against Jewish people and against people of certain religions and faiths and skin colors, and he sought to kill them. And what he did is he put them in these camps and had them killed, whether it was through gas chambers or shooting them. And he killed millions and millions. I think the number is something like 17 million Jews. And anyway, this is called the Holocaust, the mass killing of these Jewish people. So I know that was quick. That's a brief overview of World War II, slightly overview of the Holocaust. But like I said, I do have 2 things I want you to read. One is on World War II, and then you've got some questions to answer. One is on the Holocaust, and then you've got some questions to answer on that as well. And then next week, we're going to talk about propaganda, which is going to kind of backtrack and go into World War II as well. And I'll give you a little bit more idea about what that is on next week's lesson. So if you have any questions, shoot me an email, and I hope you guys have a good week. See you later.